January 17, 1942. A bitter wind swept through upstate New York, rattling the steel-framed windows of the small military hospital. Inside, the air was thick with the scent of antiseptic and unwashed uniforms. Fluorescent lights flickered overhead, casting sharp shadows on the faces of young soldiers slumped on cots, waiting for care that seemed endless. Nurses moved briskly, their shoes squeaking on the polished floors, voices barely audible over the groans of the wounded. A sergeant clutched his chest, wincing as a doctor tapped a stethoscope against his ribs. The instrument was outdated, fragile, and scarce, one of only a handful in the entire ward. Thermometers were slow, inconsistent, ophthalmoscopes a luxury. Across the room, a medic tried to identify an infection in a soldier's ear, holding a battered flashlight and straining his eyes. Every minute counted. Every delay could be fatal. Outside, the rumble of trucks carrying supplies and more casualties grew louder. Inside, the unspoken truth hung heavy. America's medical tools were not ready for war, and someone had to change that. The first step in that change would come from a small company in New York determined to build the devices the military desperately needed. The United States entered World War II on December 8, 1941, the day after Pearl Harbor. The attack had been swift, brutal, and unrelenting, leaving the nation in shock and scrambling to mobilize. Across the Atlantic and Pacific, global powers had already been locked in conflict for years. Britain faced relentless bombing campaigns. Germany's mechanized armies had overrun much of Europe, and Japan had carved out an empire across Southeast Asia. America's industrial and military machinery had to adapt almost overnight, and nowhere was the challenge more acute than in the field of medical care. Military hospitals across the country, some converted from old hotels, schools, or warehouses, found themselves unprepared. Army medics and Navy corpsmen were deployed faster than the infrastructure could accommodate. Equipment shortages were severe. Stethoscopes were rationed, thermometers delayed, surgical lights dim and unreliable. The war had exposed a critical vulnerability. Soldiers with treatable illnesses or infections were at risk not from enemy fire, but from the inability to diagnose conditions accurately and swiftly. Infections that could be caught in minutes with proper tools sometimes became fatal within days. The scale of the problem was staggering. By January 1942, the U.S. Army had over 1 million men in uniform, with thousands more entering training camps every week. Each soldier required baseline medical examinations: heart, lungs, eyes, ears, and general physical health, but the tools available to doctors were insufficient for the volume of patients. Even simple devices like otoscopes and ophthalmoscopes, common in civilian clinics, were almost non-existent in military facilities. Nurses improvised with flashlights. Medics relied on memory and experience, often at the expense of accuracy. Adding to the challenge was the speed of deployment. Soldiers moved from training camps to ships to battlefronts in weeks rather than months. Field hospitals needed portable, reliable diagnostic tools, but most medical equipment was bulky, delicate, or designed for stationary hospital use. Supply chains were still being built, and factories prioritized armaments, tanks, and airplanes over medical devices. The consequences were clear. Inadequate tools meant delayed diagnoses, untreated conditions, and preventable deaths. At the same time, civilian hospitals also faced strain. The war effort had drawn doctors and nurses into military service, leaving domestic facilities short-staffed. Patients with everyday ailments, ear infections, eye problems, fevers, competed for attention with industrial injuries and wartime emergencies. In this context, the gap in medical technology was not a minor inconvenience. It was a systemic threat to the health of an entire nation, both at home and on the front lines. It was against this backdrop that a small, determined company in upstate New York began to gain attention. Welch Allyn. Founded in 1915 by Dr. Francis Welch and William Allyn, the company had been a quiet force in medical innovation, focusing on instruments to improve diagnostic accuracy. Their products were respected in hospitals, but the outbreak of global war brought a new challenge. The military needed devices that were rugged, portable, and mass-producible. The stakes were no longer academic. They were life or death. Welch Allyn faced an unprecedented task. They had to design instruments capable of handling thousands of examinations a day, instruments that could withstand the rigors of transport across continents, and still provide doctors with the accuracy they needed to make rapid decisions. Every component had to be meticulously crafted: lenses, bulbs, thermometers, and stethoscopes, all calibrated for reliability. The clock was ticking. By early 1942, the U.S. government had begun contracting small medical manufacturers to fill the void. But the scale and urgency of the need were unlike anything the nation had seen. It was not enough to produce a few prototypes. Hospitals, ships, and training camps demanded hundreds, then thousands of instruments, and every delay meant more soldiers at risk. Welch Allyn recognized that to meet this demand, innovation would have to match speed, and quality could not be sacrificed for quantity. The next stage in this story would focus on how Welch Allyn rose to this challenge, developing the first portable, reliable diagnostic tools that would save countless lives and change military medicine forever. By February 1942, Welch Allyn had shifted into a wartime mindset. The small company, based in Skaneateles Falls, New York, had spent decades building a reputation for precision instruments. Their early focus had been on improving routine diagnostics: the ophthalmoscope for examining the retina, the otoscope for inspecting ears, and refined thermometers. These tools had quietly set new standards in hospitals and private practices. But the war demanded something unprecedented: portability, durability, and mass production. Instruments that could survive transport on muddy roads, bouncing on military trucks, and the rolling decks of ships, while still giving doctors precise readings, did not yet exist. Engineers and designers at Welch Allyn began working around the clock. In cramped workshops, lens grinders, metalworkers, and electricians collaborated with medical experts to reimagine every instrument. Ophthalmoscopes were redesigned with compact, rugged housings. Stethoscopes were reinforced to withstand repeated use in the field. Thermometers were calibrated for rapid, consistent readings. Each prototype was tested relentlessly, often by local doctors and visiting military medics, under conditions designed to simulate battlefield hospitals. Accuracy, reliability, and ease of use became the guiding principles. Meanwhile, the U.S. Army and Navy began formalizing contracts for medical equipment. Military inspectors visited the Skaneateles Falls factory, bringing specifications for instruments that could function across climates, from the humid jungles of the Pacific to the freezing plains of Europe. The pressure was immense. Supply chains were fragile, wartime materials were rationed, and every misstep could delay production and cost lives. Yet Welch Allyn's small, skilled workforce adapted quickly, creating assembly lines and quality control protocols that were revolutionary for a company of its size. One of the first breakthroughs came with the portable diagnostic kit, a compact case containing an otoscope, ophthalmoscope, thermometer, and small instrument for ear, eye, and throat examination. Soldiers' medical evaluations could now be completed in minutes rather than hours, with tools that maintained accuracy under harsh conditions. Reports from early field tests in military hospitals in New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts were overwhelmingly positive. Doctors could detect infections earlier, assess injuries more precisely, and triage patients more effectively. Beyond design, production logistics became a battle in itself. Components had to be sourced from multiple states, often delayed by shortages of metals, glass, and electricity rationing. The company devised creative solutions, substituting available alloys, designing adjustable lens mounts that could tolerate slight variations, and training women and older men in assembly techniques when younger laborers were drafted. Every innovation was practical, grounded in the reality of wartime constraints, yet meticulously engineered. By mid-1942, Welch Allyn's instruments began reaching the front lines. Naval ships received kits for examining sailors before and after deployment. Field hospitals in the southern United States used portable diagnostic sets to screen recruits and returning veterans. Each delivery was a small victory, a tangible proof that innovation could respond to urgent necessity. Military medics, once forced to rely on makeshift tools or memory, now had instruments that allowed them to act with confidence, diagnosing infections, fevers, or eye conditions that had previously gone unnoticed. Lives were being saved, and the standard of care in military medicine had shifted in months rather than years. The implications extended beyond immediate military needs. The innovations developed under pressure at Welch Allyn set new standards for civilian hospitals, emergency care, and later, international medical practice. The wartime crucible had accelerated design, production, and deployment of medical devices, creating a legacy that would endure long after the guns fell silent. This period of rapid development, the intersection of military necessity, innovative engineering, and human lives, set the stage for exploring the story from multiple angles. The soldiers who benefited, the tactical advantage gained on the battlefield, the leadership and ingenuity of the company, and the moral weight of providing tools that literally meant the difference between life and death. For the men on the front lines, medical tools were more than instruments. They were lifelines. In the crowded wards of Army hospitals, soldiers lay on cots shoulder to shoulder, their uniforms blood-stained, eyes hollow from fever or exhaustion. Before Welch Allyn's portable diagnostic kits, a medic might rely on intuition, probing a patient's ear with a flashlight or pressing a stethoscope to a soldier's chest that barely functioned. Infections went unnoticed, fevers untreated, and minor injuries escalated into serious complications. When the first kits arrived in early 1942, the change was immediate. Soldiers with ear infections could be diagnosed accurately. Eye conditions that would later impair vision were detected and treated. For the first time, patients could see a tangible link between care and recovery. The psychological impact was profound. Men began to trust the system, to believe that even amidst the chaos of war, their health mattered. Nurses reported fewer errors, fewer delayed treatments, and a sense of calm replaced the pervasive tension. It was a quiet victory, human lives preserved not by bullets or bombs, but by light, glass, and precision engineering. The effectiveness of an army is measured not only by its weapons, but by its ability to maintain the health of its soldiers. In 1942, inadequate diagnostic tools hampered this principle. A soldier sidelined by undetected infection weakened unit readiness. Untreated fevers spread through barracks, incapacitating entire companies. By introducing portable, reliable diagnostic instruments, Welch Allyn indirectly strengthened America's tactical position. Medics could now triage efficiently, identifying soldiers fit for duty versus those requiring isolation or treatment. Naval vessels, previously reliant on makeshift examination tables, could monitor crew health in real time, reducing downtime caused by illness. In jungle warfare simulations and cold weather exercises, officers reported fewer lost days, lower rates of preventable infections, and more accurate medical logs. The battlefield was no longer a place where sickness silently claimed manpower. It became one where proactive diagnosis helped maintain operational strength. In a conflict defined by speed, mobility, and resilience, this edge was invaluable. At the heart of Welch Allyn's success was technological ingenuity. The challenge was simple to state, but complex to execute. Build instruments that were portable, durable, and precise under extreme conditions. Engineers redesigned every component. Lenses were mounted to resist jarring. Bulbs were shock-resistant. Housings were compact yet ergonomic. Thermometers were calibrated for rapid, reliable readings, and stethoscopes were reinforced to survive thousands of examinations without losing acoustic fidelity. Each prototype underwent rigorous testing. Medics and doctors simulated battlefield conditions, dropping instruments, exposing them to moisture, testing under dim lighting. Components were refined iteratively. Lens clarity improved, handles reshaped for gloved hands, bulbs replaced with more durable filaments. It was engineering accelerated by necessity, where failure could mean not just wasted resources, but real human suffering. These innovations were quietly revolutionary, laying the groundwork for modern portable medical devices. The success of these innovations rested on the leadership of Dr. Francis Welch and William Allyn. Unlike many executives of the era, they combined medical knowledge with engineering foresight. They recognized that conventional manufacturing would not meet wartime needs, and they structured the company to respond with both speed and precision. Decisions were made on the factory floor, not just in boardrooms. Engineers, assembly workers, and even visiting military medics could propose adjustments to prototypes, and Welch and Allyn approved them rapidly. This flattened hierarchy accelerated innovation. Leadership was measured not in authority, but in the ability to solve problems under pressure, sourcing scarce materials, training new workers, and ensuring rigorous quality control. In an era when most companies were scrambling to adapt to wartime contracts, Welch Allyn demonstrated that proactive, hands-on leadership could turn crisis into opportunity, producing tools that literally saved lives. While America faced critical shortages in 1942, the Axis powers had developed varying standards of medical care for their troops. Germany's field medics were well-trained, often equipped with portable diagnostic kits and mobile field hospitals that included basic instruments for triage. Japan, by contrast, relied heavily on improvisation and rudimentary tools in remote outposts, leaving soldiers vulnerable to infections and untreated injuries. This contrast made America's gap in medical devices even more pronounced. Had the U.S. not innovated rapidly, American troops risked preventable losses in campaigns where the enemy already maintained medical readiness. The urgency was not academic. Every week that passed without reliable diagnostic tools put soldiers at strategic disadvantage. By rapidly deploying Welch Allyn's instruments, the U.S. began to close this gap, ensuring that its manpower, already outnumbered in some theaters, could remain healthy, effective, and battle-ready. Innovation in wartime carries more than technical stakes, it carries moral ones. Each faulty thermometer, each inaccurate stethoscope could result in misdiagnosis and suffering. The engineers and medics at Welch Allyn understood that their work was not just about producing instruments. It was about human life. Doctors and nurses, too, faced ethical challenges. How could they prioritize patients with inadequate tools? How could they guarantee treatment when instruments were scarce? The arrival of reliable, portable devices alleviated some of these moral burdens, enabling medical staff to make decisions based on evidence rather than guesswork. The stakes, human and ethical, were enormous. In hospitals and on ships, medics felt a renewed sense of duty and purpose, confidence that their decisions were informed by precise, dependable instruments. For soldiers, this translated into trust. For the nation, into a subtle but significant moral victory in the conduct of war. By mid-1942, the first shipments of Welch Allyn diagnostic kits were arriving in military hospitals across the United States. The scene at these facilities was both chaotic and hopeful. In a large temporary hospital in Philadelphia, rows of soldiers lay on cots, some pale with fever, others stoic from minor wounds. Medics moved quickly, unrolling new kits from wooden crates. The smell of antiseptic mingled with the metallic tang of instruments, a sensory marker of change. For the first time, doctors had tools designed to meet their exact needs. Ophthalmoscopes illuminated the interior of the eye with clarity previously impossible in field conditions. Otoscopes, now rugged and portable, allowed medics to detect ear infections and injuries with precision. Thermometers, reliable and fast, ensured fevers were diagnosed in minutes. Each instrument, tested and calibrated under the scrutiny of both engineers and military medics, translated into life-saving decisions. The impact was immediate. At one hospital, a young private developed a high fever overnight. In previous months, such a condition might have been misdiagnosed as heat exhaustion or overlooked entirely until it became critical. With the new instruments, a medic identified the early stages of pneumonia. Treatment began that afternoon. Within days, the soldiers' condition stabilized. For the first time, soldiers could see their survival linked directly to the efficacy of the diagnostic tools at hand. The ripple effect extended to operational readiness. Units that had previously reported high absenteeism due to undetected infections now maintained strength. Commanders began to notice the difference. Fewer men sidelined for preventable illnesses meant more effective training and deployment. On naval vessels, portable kits allowed ship doctors to screen the entire crew daily, catching fevers before outbreaks spread. Officers, once skeptical of small instruments, now relied on their accuracy to make tactical decisions about personnel and mission assignments. In parallel, the production process itself was a marvel of wartime ingenuity. Welch Allyn had expanded its factory, converting assembly lines into highly efficient production cells. Workers, often women and older men who had stepped into roles left vacant by draftees, learned to assemble and test complex instruments with exacting precision. Each kit underwent quality checks under simulated battlefield conditions. Instruments were dropped, exposed to moisture, and used repeatedly to ensure durability. Failure rates were minimal, and each successful test reinforced confidence in the tool's reliability. The first field deployment outside the continental United States occurred aboard a transport ship bound for the Pacific Theater. Dr. Harold Jenkins, a Navy physician, recalled the cramped medical bay aboard the vessel, a room barely large enough for a single patient. The ship's crew, exposed to tropical heat and relentless fatigue, were at high risk of infection. With the Welch Allyn kits, Dr. Jenkins could perform rapid, thorough examinations. Ear infections detected early, eye irritations treated before impairment, fevers managed before they escalated into life-threatening conditions. Every assessment, every diagnosis underscored the critical difference these instruments made. This period also marked a psychological turning point. Medics, once burdened by guesswork, now carried instruments that offered certainty. Soldiers, many of whom had lost friends to minor infections that escalated due to inadequate care, began to see hope in a new form, a small, precise tool in a medic's hands. The hospital wards, once places of uncertainty and fear, transformed into centers of controlled efficiency, where medical decisions were guided by evidence rather than improvisation. Across the military network, reports began to circulate of faster recovery times, fewer untreated infections, and improved overall health among troops. Commanding officers noted that units equipped with Welch Allyn instruments maintained higher readiness, and casualty reports showed a measurable decrease in illness-related sidelining. What began as a quiet innovation in a small New York factory had become a decisive tool in the broader war effort. Yet even as success mounted, challenges persisted. Supply chains were stretched thin, materials were rationed, and the demand for instruments far exceeded production capacity. Engineers worked tirelessly, iterating designs to improve efficiency without sacrificing reliability. Each delay, each obstacle, reminded the team of the stakes. Behind every instrument was a soldier whose life depended on its accuracy. By the summer of 1942, the climax was clear. Welch Allyn's portable diagnostic tools had moved from prototype to battlefield necessity. Hospitals, ships, and field units could now provide medical care that was faster, more precise, and far more reliable than ever before. The decisive moment had arrived, not through combat, but through innovation, precision, and the tireless effort of a small company meeting an enormous challenge. The story was far from over, however. The next phase would see these instruments scaled to mass production, distributed across theaters of war, and fully integrated into military operations, a transformation that would define the war's medical landscape. By late summer 1942, Welch Allyn had moved beyond prototypes and small deployments. The factory in Skaneateles Falls hummed with unrelenting energy, assembly lines producing hundreds of diagnostic kits each week. The company's engineers had perfected a streamlined design, lightweight, durable, and standardized for rapid use by medics in any theater of war. Wooden crates filled with instruments were shipped to hospitals, training camps, naval ships, and field units across the Atlantic and Pacific. Every crate carried the promise of accurate diagnosis and, with it, lives saved. In field hospitals from New York to California, doctors reported a transformation in medical care. Infections that had previously gone undetected were now caught early. Soldiers with fevers received prompt treatment. Eye and ear conditions, once sidelined as minor inconveniences, were diagnosed and managed before they could escalate. The difference was measurable. Recovery times shortened, complications dropped, and military readiness improved. Commanders noted the indirect strategic advantage. Units were stronger, healthier, and more capable of rapid deployment. On the naval front, the impact was equally dramatic. The USS Lexington, preparing for a Pacific campaign, received its first batch of Welch Allyn kits in August 1942. Medical officers reported that crew evaluations, previously slow and incomplete, were now efficient and thorough. Fever screening became routine. Ear infections from damp, crowded quarters were caught before they spread. Captain James Harwood remarked in his log, "These instruments save more than time. They save men. Our readiness depends on it." Across the fleet, similar accounts surfaced. The instruments had become indispensable, a quiet but decisive advantage in maintaining operational strength. Meanwhile, the engineers at Welch Allyn continued refining their designs under the constant pressure of wartime demand. Every week brought feedback from the field. A thermometer's calibration drifted in tropical climates, a stethoscope tubing cracked after repeated use, or an ophthalmoscope bulb burned out. These issues were addressed immediately. Replacement parts were shipped overnight, training manuals updated, and assembly lines adjusted. The company had transformed into a wartime innovation machine, small in scale, but formidable in impact. The human stakes remained vivid. Medics recounted saving lives that, without accurate instruments, would have been lost. Soldiers who would have been sidelined with minor infections returned to duty. Nurses noted fewer misdiagnoses, reduced patient suffering, and a renewed sense of control in wards once overwhelmed by chaos. Even minor improvements, a more reliable otoscope, a sturdier case, a clearer thermometer scale, had outsized effects on outcomes. Each device became a tool of hope, a bridge between human vulnerability and technological precision. As production ramped up, government recognition followed. The U.S. Army Medical Department formally approved Welch Allyn instruments for all field hospitals. Contracts expanded, and the company scaled operations to meet demand across multiple theaters of war. By autumn 1942, tens of thousands of diagnostic kits were in circulation, establishing a standardized baseline of medical capability that had previously been absent. Soldiers, medics, and doctors alike came to rely on these tools not just for convenience, but as essential instruments of survival. This moment, the transition from small-scale innovation to mass deployment, marked the decisive turning point. Welch Allyn's devices had moved from experimental prototypes to indispensable instruments of war. In a conflict defined by speed, scale, and uncertainty, the ability to diagnose accurately and quickly became a force multiplier. Lives were saved not through guns or tanks, but through clarity, precision, and human ingenuity. By the end of 1942, the transformation was evident. Military hospitals operated with newfound efficiency. Field medics carried kits that empowered them to act decisively. Commanders observed measurable improvements in unit readiness. The war's medical landscape had been irrevocably altered, and a small company in upstate New York had proven that innovation under pressure could achieve monumental impact. As the front lines grew more complex and casualties mounted, the lessons learned from these early deployments would echo throughout the remainder of the war. The success of Welch Allyn's diagnostic tools had not only saved lives in 1942, but had established principles of design, durability, and usability that would guide military medicine for decades. By the end of 1942, the impact of Welch Allyn's diagnostic tools was clear across the U.S. military. Hospitals once overwhelmed by minor but debilitating conditions now operated with unprecedented efficiency. Soldiers who might have been sidelined by undetected infections or untreated ear and eye problems returned to duty faster. Medical records from Army training camps in New York, Pennsylvania, and Massachusetts reflected a measurable reduction in preventable illnesses, a direct result of early and accurate diagnosis. Naval operations also benefited. On ships deployed to the Pacific, medical officers reported fewer crew members lost to fevers, infections, or undiagnosed conditions. The rapid screening enabled by portable otoscopes, ophthalmoscopes, and thermometers allowed for swift intervention, preventing minor ailments from escalating into life-threatening emergencies. Command logs noted that ships equipped with Welch Allyn kits maintained higher operational readiness compared to those without. These small instruments, often overlooked by strategists, became an invisible but decisive factor in maintaining combat effectiveness. The human stories underscored the numbers. A young private recovering from severe ear infection credited a portable otoscope for detecting the condition before permanent damage occurred. A medic on a naval vessel described saving dozens of crew members from untreated fevers, simply because he could identify early symptoms with reliable thermometers. Nurses in field hospitals recounted fewer misdiagnoses and shorter patient stays. The tools did more than save time. They preserved lives and morale. Production records from Welch Allyn reveal the scale of this achievement. By December 1942, the company had shipped tens of thousands of kits nationwide, overcoming severe wartime shortages of metals, glass, and electricity. Factory floors operated around the clock, with workers implementing rigorous quality control measures to ensure that each instrument met military specifications. Every device represented not just innovation, but a tangible commitment to the soldier's well-being. The military's formal recognition reinforced this significance. The U.S. Army Medical Department issued reports highlighting the success of these devices, recommending their widespread adoption across all field hospitals and training camps. Military medics were trained in their use, and protocols were updated to integrate Welch Allyn instruments into routine examinations. What had begun as a small-scale innovation in a New York factory became an institutional standard, establishing a baseline of medical care that had previously been absent. Beyond immediate military applications, the instruments began influencing civilian hospitals. The precision, portability, and durability of the tools proved invaluable in domestic settings, particularly in rural or understaffed facilities. Hospitals that previously struggled with outdated or unreliable equipment adopted Welch Allyn devices, accelerating improvements in general medical care. The war had catalyzed not only military innovation, but also a broader transformation of American healthcare infrastructure. The cumulative effect of these developments was profound. Soldiers were healthier, medics more effective, and hospitals more capable. Commanders observed fewer disruptions to training and deployment schedules. The war effort, in a small but critical way, was strengthened by instruments that fit into a medic's hand. Lives were saved not by strategy alone, but by the precision and reliability of medical devices designed under extraordinary pressure. This stage of the story sets the stage for the second part of the aftermath. The long-term impact of Welch Allyn's wartime innovations on the medical industry, hospital standards, and a legacy of portable diagnostics in both military and civilian contexts. The influence of Welch Allyn's wartime innovations extended far beyond 1942. What began as an urgent response to military necessity became a blueprint for modern medical diagnostics. Hospitals, military and civilian alike, recognized the value of portable, reliable instruments. Ophthalmoscopes, otoscopes, thermometers, and portable diagnostic kits, once rare and specialized, became standard tools of care. The emphasis on durability, precision, and ease of use carried forward into post-war medical technology, shaping expectations for generations of doctors and medics. Industry observers took note. Other medical device manufacturers, inspired by Welch Allyn's success, began producing rugged, portable instruments capable of surviving high-volume use in hospitals and field conditions. Standardization became a priority. The war had demonstrated that medical tools were not luxury items. They were essential instruments for national security. The U.S. government, now aware of the strategic importance of medical readiness, continued to invest in research, development, and mass production of diagnostic tools well after hostilities ceased. The human impact was equally lasting. Soldiers who had received timely diagnoses in 1942 recovered fully and returned to duty, carrying stories of how small, precise instruments had preserved their health. Medics and nurses gained confidence in their ability to intervene effectively, shaping professional practices and standards of care. Training protocols evolved. Lessons learned from wartime deployments informed both military medical curricula and civilian nursing programs. The experience underscored a critical truth. Innovation, when paired with urgency and necessity, could save lives on a massive scale. The legacy of Welch Allyn also highlighted a new dimension of ethical responsibility in medicine and industry. Engineers and executives realized that their designs directly affected human life. Decisions about materials, calibration, and usability were not merely technical, they were moral. The company set a precedent for quality control, field testing, and responsiveness to feedback that would become a hallmark of medical device production. These principles informed not only wartime efforts, but also peacetime innovation, ensuring that subsequent generations of medical instruments were reliable, precise, and user-friendly. By the close of 1942, the broader medical landscape had been transformed. Military hospitals operated with a new standard of care, field medics were empowered with accurate tools, and civilian facilities began to adopt wartime innovations. The small company in upstate New York had achieved something extraordinary. It had turned necessity into innovation, transforming a critical weakness into a decisive advantage. Lives were saved, readiness improved, and the foundation for modern medical diagnostics had been laid. As the war progressed, Welch Allyn's innovations would continue to evolve, influencing everything from emergency medicine to telemedicine decades later. Yet the defining moment remained those first months of 1942, when a nation unprepared for the scale of conflict found an answer in the ingenuity, precision, and determination of a small team dedicated to improving human health. The aftermath was more than numbers and reports. It was a shift in how medicine could respond under pressure, a transformation that reshaped the expectations and capabilities of both military and civilian healthcare. The story of Welch Allyn in 1942 is a testament to what can be achieved when necessity meets ingenuity. In a nation unprepared for the scale of global conflict, a small company transformed a critical weakness into a life-saving advantage. Soldiers who might have succumbed to preventable infections, fevers, or untreated injuries were given a fighting chance, not through strategy or firepower, but through precise instruments held in the hands of medics. It is a reminder that innovation often arises not in comfort, but under pressure. The engineers, designers, and medical experts at Welch Allyn faced scarcity, uncertainty, and immense responsibility. Every calibration, every lens adjustment, every reinforced housing carried weight. Behind each device was a human life. Their work demonstrates that technological progress is inseparable from human purpose. Precision mattered, not for profit or prestige, but for survival. The impact extended far beyond the hospitals of 1942. Welch Allyn's instruments set new standards for reliability, portability, and usability that reshaped both military and civilian medicine. They accelerated the professionalization of field medical care and established the principle that even in chaos, accurate diagnosis could preserve lives. The ripple effects, safer soldiers, more efficient hospitals, and a transformed medical industry continue to this day. Ultimately, the story is one of quiet heroism. While battles were fought on distant shores, another fight unfolded in workshops, factories, and hospital wards, a battle against human vulnerability and the limits of available technology. It is a narrative of lives preserved, of ingenuity harnessed for the greater good, and of a small team whose work left an indelible mark on history. In the shadow of war, Welch Allyn proved that innovation is more than invention, it is a moral act. And in the hands of a medic, in the eyes of a soldier, it became more than science. It became hope.